Hi, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are at in the world. My name is Jacob Udodu Jacob. I'm the founding executive director of the Global Center for Rehumanizing Democracy. So welcome to the liberal arts as civic infrastructure from democracy, AI, and the freedom to learn, a survival curriculum for the 21st century. This webinar is sponsored by Alt Liberal Arts, and Alt Liberal Arts is a global education initiative concerned with freedom to learn, civic engagement, and advancement of the liberal arts. In collaboration with Bard College and the Global Higher Education Alliance for the 21st century, Alt Liberal Arts offers free global online lectures and courses for which you can register at altliberalarts.org. These lectures would not be possible without the support from the Open Society Foundation and Bard College. There's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen where you can enter your questions or comments throughout this online seminar. And I very much look forward to discussing as many of your questions as time allows. Thank you and welcome once again. I'll be sharing my screen shortly, and I'll be continuing from where we stopped in the last session. And as I get ready to do that, I also would like to perhaps share a few things from the last conversation and then set the stage for what we shall be doing today. But before we get started, I would like to say that there's something about my work that I did mention very briefly during the last session that I think is important to emphasize today, or at least to say it again today. In addition to my work in policy and research, I'm also a Benedictine spiritual director. And that I have to say is part of my life I don't often talk much about. But I feel the need now to talk more about it and to surface the aspect that aspect, I should say, of my thinking a lot more. That aspect of Benedictine background. And in the Benedictine tradition, there's a practice called Lectio Divina, that's divine reading. And it's not about consuming information in that sense, but more about dwelling with the text until you begin to see what was invisible at first glance. So you read, you meditate, you pray, you contemplate, and it's in the stillness. It's in that stillness that meaning reveals itself, meaning that was already within the text, and that meaning then stems from silence, and that silence then becomes a form of contemplative practice. And these ancient practices seem, I would say, impossibly remote from our contemporary crisis of information warfare, yet they may be precisely what democracy requires to survive in the age of AI-enhanced reflexive control. This is the menu. I think I can put this on full screen. Fantastic. So this is the menu for today. We'll just do a quick recap of last week, and I'll talk about an incident that happened just about 18 months ago now, or thereabout, the algorithmic amplification of the Southport attack. Then I'll also talk about what AI agents cannot do. And then at the end, I'll have a conversation about how we can rethink liberal education. In the last session, we talked about AI-enhanced reflexive control and used Bulgaria as a case study because that's where we conducted the research. And we looked at the 5 dimensions of AI-enhanced reflexive control, starting with algorithmic amplification. And this is critical to our understanding of the kind of impact that AI, in this case, algorithms and generative AI, have really on democracies. Then the next is computational content generation, the ability of AI to enable the mass generation of content that are very specifically tailored to identified target audiences. I have to say that I will go back today to talk about algorithmic amplification, but in a different context, to use that as a way to locate what we need to think about when rethinking liberal education. And last week, we also talked about predictive audience modeling, which identifies vulnerabilities and targets. In the case of Bulgaria, we observed how the Pravda network very brilliantly, I have to say, targeted audiences that were Bulgarian speakers in a very different way from audiences that were English speakers with very different types of content. Then those content could be very clearly mapped out to the vulnerabilities, if you like, of those various audience groups. Then dynamic narrative evolution, which adapts to changing conditions. We observed that at the beginning of the operation, we started monitoring them from December 2024. And we observed that at the beginning of that operation, the focus of the different messaging was on seeking to justify the Russian aggression, military aggression in Ukraine. But gradually, we saw how that shifted quite significantly from that messaging to issues that people were talking about most, which at that time was Euro adoption. Then it also moved as winter was coming to energy security. And we could see that dynamic adaptive evolution of content. Then feedback-driven optimization, continuously looking and scanning in a way that the system can, on its own, very systematically evolve in a way or adapt its content to influence various audience groups at scale. The big takeaway for AI-enhanced reflexive control fundamentally is that it's not so much about a particular message seeking to convince audience groups through a particular content or a particular message. It's essentially shaping the entire information environment or the decision-making process by principally simulating consensus in society, and doing that by identifying different amplifiers, local amplifiers, through a network of various channels across various social media platforms, and essentially making the message, adapting the message to a platform and also to specific audience. And this is constantly evolving in a way that fundamentally changes the information environment in a way that's desired by the source of these operations. So what do we do in such circumstances? And what kind of impact can this have on society? Well, I'll go back to algorithmic amplification systems and how that can fundamentally lead to violence even in society and cause tension across different groups in society. But first, I want to bring a very unfortunate, I would say, case that happened in July 2024. Most of you that follow this situation in the UK, I'm sure you heard about this. On the 29th of July 2024, A 17-year-old young man went into a Taylor Swift themed dance class and stabbed and killed 3 young girls, injuring several others. The attacker was a 17-year-old young man, and he was born in the UK. He's a British-born guy. And police confirmed almost immediately that the attack was not terror related. However, within hours, false narratives claiming that the attacker was a Muslim immigrant who had arrived by boat essentially swirled social media space. The result was anti-immigrant riots across UK towns and cities, which further, of course, strained social relations across the country. When we took, again, the Disinformation Observatory, working very closely with our partners at Sensica Technologies in Sofia, when we took a closer look at what happened, what led to the misinformation about the identity of the attacker. Again, I should say that the attacker was a 17-year-old British-born young man, and it was not terror-related, as the police had said at the time. But all of a sudden, there was a narrative that swirled social media space on the day of the attack, that he was Muslim, who had arrived the country the previous year by boat. And this was all over social media. But let's trace back to how this happened. Let's just take a few steps backwards. Just a few months earlier, Elon Musk had taken over Twitter. This study, this research, I have to say, is focused on algorithmic amplification on X platform, or Twitter as it then was. So a few months earlier then, that in November 2023, Elon Musk, after he had taken over ownership of Twitter, shared this tweet in front of you. And he said a major update to the recommendation algorithm is rolling out over the next few days. So this will help surface smaller accounts and posts outside of your friend follows network. As always, this will be made open source and undergo continuous improvement. The extent to which this has been made open source is debatable, but that's a story for another day. And there were lots, as you can imagine, of reactions, some positive, some there were pushbacks, as you can imagine. Some people said, there's a reaction to that post, no, make following the default. When I press home and allow me to hide. For you, now this essentially created 2 feeds: the accounts that you're following, the following feed, and the for you feed. These are from posts from accounts you do not know. You don't know these people, and the following feed, even before Elon Musk took over and changed the algorithm, was generally chronological to a good degree. But for you, feed is not necessarily chronological. It's not based on what happened last week or today, building on what happened previously. It's actually based mostly on engagement. So this on the right-hand side is from Twitter, the support there. Said the for you and following tabs replace home and latest, which was what the interface showed before, and will be pinned to the top of your timeline, so you can easily switch between them, swipe to switch timelines instead of tapping that icon that's shown there. On paper, it seems good. I mean, the way this was being framed by X or Twitter at the time was that this was to democratize Twitter, surface accounts that may not be so big, and move power from influencers to anybody across social media space. The algorithm was significantly changed. So when we look at social media, when we look at the impact really, of social media and society, one of the things you want to look at very carefully across platforms is the algorithms. And for some platforms, this is a trade secret, and it's not very transparent as you would want them to be. Now, let's then look at the amplification cycle that led, in many ways, I would say, to real-world impact of riots and violence against immigrant communities across the United Kingdom. The initial false post about the identity of the attacker actually emerged not from Twitter, but from LinkedIn. So there's a post here from a certain Eddie Murray, which unfortunately is the father of one of the kids that were attacked. And he posted on LinkedIn and said, "My two youngest children went to holiday club this morning in Southport for a day of fun, only for a migrant to enter and murder / fatally wound multiple children. My kids are fine," he said. "They are shocked and in hysterics, but they are safe. My thoughts are with the other 30 kids and families that are suffering right now," he said. And there's something he added, that if there's any time to close the borders completely, it's right now, and added, "Enough is enough," with an angry emoji. Now, when I explain narratives to people, I say narratives are stories about stories. The story is not necessarily the narrative, but the interpretation, the meaning making is where the narrative comes from. So there's a news here of an attack, something that happened, really sad news, very unfortunate one. But there's an interpretation, there's a meaning making. There's a context within which this story is located here. And there's a certain audience that this is being appealed to. There's a judgment being made already that this was done by an immigrant. And this was on LinkedIn. Almost immediately, this moved from LinkedIn across platforms to Twitter. Somebody shares that post on Twitter and says a parent who had two children in attendance at the dance class in Southport, UK today confirmed the knife attack suspect was a migrant. So this, again, this was a British-born guy. So, but the false information originates somewhere from a source that you would see as reliable within the context of the event, because he's a parent to one of the attacked children. So that essentially makes him a credible source in that sense. So there's that initial false post. It's a small fringe account. It's not a known person. Small account publishes the misinformation about the Muslim immigrant attacker, and there's cross-platform and amplification onto Twitter. And because of lots of activities here, we can see that algorithms notice that there's a lot of activity in terms of lot of tweeting, lot of retweets. We could see a lot of retweets here. To the extent that the algorithm recognizes high engagement as interesting content. So it doesn't matter whether this is from a fringe account or from an influencer account. The algorithm notices this as an interesting content. And then it doesn't matter whether you follow any of these people or not. You find it in your For You feed, because the algorithm thinks that that's important enough for you to see. And the next thing is the outrage that follows. That there were some accounts that had much stronger following, like Europe Invasion and the Europe Invasion account. And if you can see the dates here, the date is actually, before I go there, this is actually the date of the attack. That's the 29th of July. And as at the time we captured this at 3:49 p.m. on the day, there were already 6.8 million views on that particular post. And on further analysis, these are some of the things that we found within the time of the attack or the date of the attack. Most of the posts within just a few days of the attack, most of the posts were reshares or reposts. And this is significant. Within just a couple of days, the reposts, we're looking at reposts in the regions of well over 700,000 posts. And um, and and of course, the original content were quite minimal, but lots of repost of that misinformation, the misinformation about the identity of the attacker. Um, within 24 hours, as a matter of fact, the number of posts had reached 183,000 across different languages and across different by different social users. The total engagement had reached astronomical numbers, as you can see, well over 400 million, with a potential reach of close to 500 million. Total social followers was in the region of 1.5 billion. That's when you put together different social followers. These numbers are a multiple counted, I would say, across social media platforms. But you can essentially see the reach within 1 day of the attack just due to algorithmic amplification. The other thing that's worth mentioning at this stage is the source of information. The source of information, you would expect that the police source, Merseyside police, or even the local newspaper Liverpool Echo would be the most quoted source, but it wasn't at all. The most quoted source were other sources on Twitter. The account that we had seen earlier, Europe Invasion, had, in terms of social mentions, was mentioned or retweeted most, as you can see, some 24.5%. And Europe Invasion, as you could see from the other post, let me just go back here, had posted, just go back there. Sorry about that. Okay. Yeah, the Europe Invasion had posted here that a man attacked in Nasri in Southport and stabbed 6 children. Multiple ambulances attended the scene. 1 child died. The attack is alleged to be a Muslim immigrant. And this particular post was reshared several hundreds of thousands of times. Right. Most people quoted that source with that wrong information. And all this happened within 24 hours. Now, we drilled in to see the top 10 sources of posts about the identity of the attack. And what we found was that the top 10 accounts that posted this, reaching over 700,000 people, were actually fringe accounts that had an average of 3,000 followers, and mostly accounts that people don't know, but most of their posts were retweets. And what that showed indeed was the power of the algorithm that had fundamentally changed the way we see information, the way we encounter information. So information that normally would have not reached those that we would not have reached us because we're not following them. We're compelled, as it were, to get to see that information. Now, with what effect? We can see that one of the things we observed was that the post became a lot more emotional as the days went by. Was the still on that same day as the time progressed during the day. There was this particular one that said allegedly and apparently he's 17 years old and arrived here last year. If that's correct, we wouldn't be getting his name or detail for a long time, as children have anonymity, he said. And there's a name that was given to the attacker. This was not his name at all, but the name was given to the attacker, and it's claimed that he was already in the MI6 watch list. And there was a very interesting post. This person, the reason I'm putting this post, this account has now been deleted, Lucy, is that this person was held to account, and that was a very rare case to see for this particular post. And what she posted was mass deportation now, set fire to all the expeditive hotels full of the bastards for all I care. While you're at it, take the treacherous government and politicians with them. And she said that she's physically sick, knowing what these families will now have to endure. If that makes me racist, so be it, she said. And all this happened on the day of the incident. The emotional amplification, because again, the algorithm has been reconfigured, as it were, to see this sort of this sort of amplification, or this sort of post and this sort of engagement as something that we all want to see, and then it becomes constantly available on the For You feed. The interesting aspect of all this is that this is the information environment that we live in currently. This is what our students, for those of us that are educators, this is the information environment that they live in, information environment that is curated by algorithms, what they are exposed to on a daily basis in many different ways are defined by algorithmic systems. For that report, if you want to see more of that report, you can actually get the full reports there and read it at your own time. A few weeks ago, there was, just 2 weeks ago, I would say, there was a very interesting report about Multibook, multibook.com, a social media platform for AI agents that was launched on the 28th of January. Within just a few days, the account that was created on that platform reached a total of 1.5 million different accounts, 1.5 million. And the interesting thing was that these weren't real people, but these were AI agents. So Multibook was created for AI agents. Human beings can essentially go on there and observe, but they can't necessarily post. But AI agents can actually post, share, and create groups that they can have conversations and so on and so forth. And one of the things when I went on there to observe that shocked me quite a bit was one of the groups that was created, A Future Without Humans. And within a day, they had created a manifesto for a 50-year manifesto for a future without humans, what that would look like, what that future would look like, and how to get to that future. And this was all defined and developed by AI agents. I mean, it's fascinating the direction that AI is going. But in the midst of all that, it's important for us to pause and see, recognize what AI agents can do and what they cannot do. And the space that's created is actually where liberal education can help to strengthen the ability to think and fill out the spaces that AI cannot operate in. One of those spaces is recognizing when problems are framed incorrectly. That's one of the things that AI agents can't do, and this is based on very recent research that was done. I'll share the link at the end of this lecture. They cannot recognize when problems are framed incorrectly. They also cannot perceive what is absent from data. Thirdly, they cannot exercise ethical judgment about competing values. They cannot question assumptions that are embedded in tasks. They cannot also think outside of the framework of the question. And what remains human that I think it's important for us as educators to understand what remains irreducibly human. And number one is perceive absence, not just presence, not just what's there, but what isn't there, what's missing. Then also question the framing of questions themselves, how questions are framed. And judge when efficiency is the wrong value. Sometimes efficiency is not all there is. And having that moral judgment to see that, yes, efficiency is important here, but maybe that's not all there is. And know when not to act. And finally, generate genuine novelty, not recombination of information, of data, but think completely outside of the box. And that's something that remains irreducibly human. And this is the space as liberal educators that we have to operate in. AI today can create poetry. It can create sublime works of art. But what they do not have is that space from where poetry comes from, that place of joy, of love, of a broken heart, even. It can create lyrics, music, and so on. But where that space from which it comes from, that's something that AI cannot access. AI indeed can create those sublime works of art, but the space from which they come from, that ability to look um, uh, whether it's at a Mona Lisa or to look at a chair and like Van Gogh and then look then interpret that looking into art. That's something that AI cannot do. And these are at least for now, and perhaps for the foreseeable future. And that remains a space that liberal educators will have to think very carefully about protecting. Um, and in thinking about that, I mean, I want to have a conversation. I would say about what really liberal education can do in the age of AI, and what kind of curriculum that we need to build at this time, because the curriculum that we have created over the years has served us, of course, well, but in the current information environment, the curriculum that we've built will not serve us well. I'll talk about, first of all, liberal arts as contemplative practice, and that's something I'll just stop sharing my screen, so because I'd just like to talk about that. Liberal arts, I'd like to see liberal arts as contemplative practice in that sense. And we typically ask, what skills does liberal arts education provide? Of course, they provide critical thinking, they provide cultural literacy, communication, and so on. But what if we change the question to what kind of human being does liberal arts education form? What can they do? We can also ask, who do they become through the process of learning itself? And this shift, this last question, shift from product to process, where we focus mostly on the end product in terms of the completed essay or the completed research or the completed assignment. But there's need to start to think more about the creation process, that process of learning, and in that sense, see reading more as dwelling, not just consuming, and or see reading beyond something that's extractive. Because currently we ask, what sort of information can I pull from this text, or what's the main argument, or what facts do I need? But we can also have a different way of allowing texts to resist our understanding. And going back to texts multiple times in the Benedictine tradition, there's like I said earlier, there's something called Lectio Divina, and that's sort of divine reading, to explain it literally. It's sitting down with a text, knowing that there's meaning in the text, but there's also meaning within you, and often staying in silence to discover not just the meaning that's in that text, but the meaning that's within the reader, that comes from a contemplative space of silence. And in that case, writing then becomes a form of thinking, not just reporting. Because most students write, and when we write in that sense, it's about demonstrating knowledge that's acquired. And the essay or the article that's written then becomes the container, if you like, for information. But writing can be the activity of thinking itself, using language to really discover what one thinks, not report what one knows in that sense. And this, in many cases, would require embracing uncertainty and allowing, if it's an essay, to form or to develop itself organically, and trusting that process of production or creation over the finished product. And when students write this way, or when they encounter text that way, they develop that tolerance for ambiguity. They also learn that not knowing is not a failure, but a necessary condition for discovery. And discussion then, whether it's a class discussion or dialogue, becomes quite exploratory, not just a debate. And research can become a form of discovery, not necessarily verification. But the key aspect of this is that creation is then the process, I should say, of creation then becomes the end product, not the creation, not the product, not the produced essay, but that actual process of creating, of engaging with the literature or with the material or with the data, what that data does to you, the lens that sees the data then becomes even more important than the output, because essentially the output or the product or the analyzed product, AI increasingly is able to generate that, is able to produce that, and increasingly at a pace that human beings, at a velocity and at a capability that human beings cannot reproduce. So liberal education must learn, as it were, to value that act of creating itself, not just what is created. So in that sense, the painting is less important than the experience of painting. The poem is less important than the process or the activity of bringing it into being. And the essay matters, of course, but what matters more is who you become in writing that essay. And the process of creation then is not just about making objects, but it's also about becoming through the act, and who you become through the act of creating. And this new way of learning connects us, the human being, the students, more to the learning itself, so that the learning is not just an output or a product that has to be manufactured. And this is the way that we we can indeed start to, as a society, prevent the uh, what's coming, because what's coming. I did mention in the last session about Marshall McLuhan's work, which it's interesting talking about frontier AI, that actually referring to scholarship that's almost half a century old. But it's interesting that he is somehow looking at the patterns of media and technology, was able to foresee the direction that media technology is going, and propose this tetrad of media effects, where, among others, he argued that that new media technologies can, of course, enhance something in us, but they can also reverse. They can also render certain senses obsolete. And I did talk about my son, and who's 14-year-old, and I'm trying to get his handwriting to be a lot better, because his handwriting is horrible, but um, uh, but he keeps pushing back. Look, nobody writes anymore. And again, right before our eyes, we're seeing that the handwriting is becoming obsolete, and our thinking faculty, our ability to think, to question, to scrutinize critically is on the line, with not just with generative AI in that sense, but agentic AI as well, thinking of the direction that it is going. And I'd like to stop there, at least pause there to take some questions and comments and reflections. I see this more as a conversation that I'd like to have with colleagues. So I'll take a pause right there, and welcome thoughts, questions, comments. So if you have questions, thoughts, comments, do feel free to use the chat option, and share your comments or your reflections or your questions, as the case may be. I guess it's quite a lot to take in in one in one sitting. But if okay, there's one question here. The tools of AI are so organic, it seems natural and authentic. How can we alert people not to be so complacent? Well, yeah, we are gradually depending. I think that's a very interesting question. Thanks for asking. We're becoming very dependent on AI, and indeed it's organic in that sense, because it's gradually being integrated into our everyday um, uh, uh, not just way of life in that sense, but scholarship as well. And it seems natural, and you're right, and authentic. How alerting people is through forums like this. Then the liberal arts institutions have a key role. I did mention in the last session about how we gave students recently a reading assignment to read through text and comment on it. And the 25 students in the class came back with almost something similar. And that's again, that's something that that Turnitin will not really be able to spot in that sense. Um, but we have to completely upturn education, or the way we learn, and our entire relationship with knowledge. And that has to come from classrooms, particularly liberal arts institutions. It has to come from there, because the only way that society can be made to be aware of what we are facing is if knowledge institutions, in this case, higher education institutions, actually tell society, wait a minute, there's something, there's a direction that we are going that may not serve humanity well at the long run. What we're saying, and the reason why it feels so natural and so authentic, is that, look, lots and lots of money is thrown into AI across all countries, and it's a solid business, and there's a lot of funding that's going in that direction from governments, from businesses, and so on, and there's strong reasons, of course, and humanity needs it in that sense, in terms of its very broad capabilities. So one cannot push against that massive wind, but we can look at the patterns and then preserve what's most important, which is our ability to think critically, to think deeply, and to discriminate, to scrutinize critically in a positive way, and to recognize what is uniquely human. Like I said in the last session, that AI has the knowledge, but in many, I mean, even in complex systems. But what it doesn't have in that sense is that history, that personal story, that relationship with knowledge, in that sense. And it's crucial for us to pay more attention to that. There's another question here. How would you redesign courses to reflect the new reality and spread of AI? That's an interesting question. Thank you for asking. Um, yeah, I would start by um, I would start, like I said um, earlier, by emphasizing the person, the human, the relationship between the student and knowledge. And the knower then becomes as important as what the knower is seeking to know. So where I would focus my attention on, if I'm redesigning a curriculum, it would really be bringing the students to the center, not just the object of, not having the subject in that sense, but having the student, the learner, as the subject of inquiry here. What rises within that subject, that knower, then that student, in recognition or not of the knowledge that they encounter? How can they pause, reflect, and notice what others don't notice, what AI may not notice? So I'll probably create a slow curriculum, a slow classroom, a class that focuses not just on multiple texts, but on few enough text where students can spend time going through, whether it's one chapter, but going through that chapter, one research again and again and again, and discovering something new. What part of themselves resonate? What do they bring to that paragraph, or that particular data that they're interacting with? So in redesigning the curriculum, what I should say we need to do, we need a whole of university approach to this, where faculty, students, indeed, and of course senior administration will really sit down and understand the epistemic shift, because that's the space that we're getting into, something that we've not seen before. So it's a conversation that would need to involve everybody in the room in that sense. Another question, what does critical thinking really mean at this point? That's a very interesting question. What does critical thinking really mean at this point? How do you define it? Yeah, thanks for asking that. I mean, in the age of AI, how do you define really critical thinking? because what we call what we call critical thinking, or what we have seen over the years as critical thinking, the ability to discriminate, the ability to reflect and to bring in different points of views based on our own very unique lenses. I think that's evolving very significantly. Again, because these are capabilities that AI can deliver very um, at, at scale and at speed. I started by talking about the X platform and how one person just sat down and changed the algorithm of the platform. And by changing the algorithm of the platform, it changes significantly the way we come across information, the way we encounter information, and even and even the way we experience that information and where. And in a way that's not even chronological, in a way that what happened yesterday or even last week can be refined and reinterpreted for us um, based based on what's being curated, or based on the history of what we click or don't click in that sense. So in the age of AI, I mean, what I'll be thinking when I'm redefining critical thinking, I'll be looking at it from us, from the human being. Who are we? What changes within us when we encounter new knowledge? What are we experiencing? And that process, again, it's the process of creating, it's the process of knowing that I think the focus has to be on. We've focused so much, and that's just the nature of our education and the nature of our society. The finished product, the completed essay, the completed book, and so on and so forth. That finished product is what we've paid a lot of attention to. The score at the end of the semester, the grade at the end of the semester, and so on. That becomes so important than even the learning. So where I pay more attention is that space of knowing, that space before the finished product, the finished essay. What happens within that space? And most significantly, who do we become? What happens within us? Because we have to discriminate between what AI can generate or can produce and what it can't, because AI can produce that knowledge, that end product. But what it does not have is that spirit, if you like, that soul, that experience, that background that it brings to that knowledge, and the extent to which that the knowledge encountered is influenced or is experienced or influenced by the background. So yeah, so that's the way I'd look at critical thinking. We have to redefine the critical thinking in the AI age. Um, there is one more. Everyone, apologies for late joining. Okay, yeah, that's fine. Tapas Kumar, thanks for joining. Another question that's come in. AI and AI tools are becoming so popular and on most search engines nowadays, of course, are the overviews. So, what steps could someone take from being heavily reliant on AI and algorithms to discovering and creating knowledge and ideas themselves? Thanks. That's a very important question. I started by talking about my background as a spiritual director, as a Benedictine spiritual director, and one thing that the Benedictines do so much is silence. Just having a time to let silence also create meaning, because the thinking there is that the meaning is not just in the text. I'm talking about in Lectio Divina now, where you're reading, whether it's a spiritual text or any kind of text, or even if it's a policy paper, the meaning is not just in there. There's also a meaning in you, in your background, in your story, and and what you bring to that encounter with the text. So the question here is how do we what steps could someone take from being heavily reliant on AI and algorithms to discovering and creating knowledge and ideas themselves? I think one has to pause. One has to pause and reflect. And in today's world, it's difficult to do so, because that the deadlines. I mean, we're moving almost at an AI pace, as it were. There is there is that's almost urgency in 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 everything, really. So I'm not in any way advocating, I should perhaps emphasize, um, our turning away from AI and new technology. I use AI. I use most of the research I do is we use AI with my colleagues at Sensica to analyze media text. I mean, large media text and large data. But pulling away is not the answer, or resisting this wave, I would say, is not the answer. But the answer is pausing, letting knowledge emerge from within, and questioning based on who we are, and staying a bit longer with texts. Because it's sometimes in staying a bit longer with text or with knowledge and going back to knowledge that we discover something that we hadn't discovered before, not because the text or the new knowledge itself has changed, but there's something within us that has evolved. Maybe after a couple of hours, there's something within us that has evolved. And in each text, each encounter, the question is, what do I bring to this text? What do I become in the course of this of experiencing this new knowledge? So um, AI gives us, I think it's one of the most remarkable um, inventions in all of human history. But it's an invention that will have implications on who we are, as a species, in that sense. How we actually engage with knowledge, how we produce knowledge, because that which would have taken a poet to create, perhaps maybe 2 days, maybe a week or more, AI can create it in minutes or less. But what AI cannot recreate is it's that space from where poetry comes from, that spirit, that experience, from where poetry comes from. And the role of liberal arts education will increasingly become helping society to protect that space, helping society to preserve that distinctively human ability to pause and morally scrutinize and reflect. That will increasingly become the most important thing uh, for the most important preoccupation, I would say, of liberal education. When we come back next week, I'll just share my screen again to conclude. If I think I'd like to, if that's okay with you, Mary, I'd like to close this at top of the hour just now. But I would just say that in the next session, which is on the 23rd February. The final session will be looking at protecting the freedom to learn. How do we work together to protect that freedom to learn in the age of AI? And when I'm talking about freedom, I'm talking about cognitive freedom in this case. I think there's another question that's just okay. Will you be sending this slide? Oh yes, I will be. And also I should also mention that this presentation will be available. The video will be available on YouTube, on the website and YouTube channel of Alt Liberal Arts. So altliberalarts.org will have the video available. The next session will be on the 23rd of February, just next Monday. And we'll be looking at protecting that freedom, the cognitive freedom to learn. How do we build the resilience? There was a question earlier about what would the curriculum of the 21st century look like, or the curriculum of this era look like? That's what I'd want to, that's what I'll be focusing on in the next session. With that, I'd like to say that we have reached the end. We have reached the end of our time, and thanks to our audience for attending this webinar. Alt Liberal Arts invite you to the final webinar in this series concerning the use of AI to attack the freedom to learn and democracy. Now I will continue to share my research on the misuses of AI as a survival curriculum for the 21st century. You can join us for my third and final lecture next Monday, 23rd of February, at the same time, 12 p.m. EST. And please do register at allliberarts.org. All the offerings from Alt Liberal Arts are free and available openly. You can also view past webinars, including this one, at Alt Liberal Arts YouTube channel. Thank you and goodbye.